some people feel going through the whole process has been really important, because I guess belief is important when you're going through that process in terms of who believes what happened. Because if it's, and I think if the police actually take a statement, some people feel, well, okay, I've been taken seriously enough about this. The police have taken a statement. I would explain that it appears the police are not doing the work, but they actually are. That it's a very slow process, it's very complicated, and they're precise and careful in what they do, you know, in terms of getting the evidence. If the person does decide to go through, then I would be supporting them with them, encouraging them, offering advocacy if they feel the police are not doing what they think they should be doing. And once again, ensuring self-care and support throughout the process. And one guy I worked with recently had a plan of what he would do when he made the statement, what he would do afterwards, how he would care for himself, let his partner know, I don't want you to ask me about the statement. I'll come home. If I want to talk, I will. However, I will probably go for a run. And his partner agreed, well, okay, I'll do that. Supported him with that. He decided not to tell his parents he was making the statement because he didn't want them to be asking him questions. So he was really focusing on self-care. As it progressed, though, his parents and sisters were made statements, and he told them, I don't want to know anything about your statement. I want to be focused on what I'm doing. So he had a very good plan. He planned well each stage of the process, and I supported him with that. So I think that went well for him.
I think it's important that people are very well informed about what the legal process looks like, because it's very different to a CSI episode. And so it's really important they have a sense of how long this process can be and how detailed their statement needs to be, particularly with historic sexual assaults that have happened to them in their childhood. It's important that they have some kind of preparation. They do some sort of preparation in terms of point forms, of dates and times, and you know that police will want to know a great deal of detail about what they can remember. And for people who can't remember dates or clothing or particular aspects of the assault, it will be very confronting to go to the police unless they're forewarned about that.
A man needs to know what he's getting into when he goes down this path. There'll be a lot of time will pass. The process of talking to the police can be very difficult, can be very triggering depending on where a man is in his process. The police won't talk to him like we will. They will want like really hard details, and they will quiz him until they get, you know, all the information that they possibly can, and that means that the man can't necessarily talk about this at his own pace. So from our point of view, if he's done all of that already in his process, that sets him up much more easily for this. There's also, I mean, this probably affects women more than men, but it can be an issue. Cross-examination can sometimes, you know, by the defence lawyer, can try and paint the survivor as somehow having attracted or being responsible for the abuse. Now, a guy's almost certainly going to be dealing with shame and guilt about that issue anyway, just because of the way that this society paints sexual assault and sexual assault survivors. So that can also trigger off all of those bad things. So we're certainly not saying that a man shouldn't seek justice. We're absolutely not saying he doesn't have the right to do it. We're saying that he would need to be very aware of what he's getting into. And then he can make his own choice. We will certainly, and we do often, walk with a man through that process. We'll go to court with him if that's what he wants. We can sit with him in the police room. So we can be present with him through that whole process. But we would really want him to be informed and ready for what, you know, for the stresses of the process and the length of time it's likely to take.
The public prosecution process is public. You're going to be exposed. If you're going to have to keep talking about a thing that you're still being triggered by and made to feel awful by because you haven't processed it yet, can be really, really damaging for you. So we have all those kind of conversations, and then if the client's conclusion is, yes, I want to do it, then we go, well, we're with you. Because I take you seriously as a human being who has the right to make whatever decision you want to make about how to get where you want to get in your life. And if going into court right now is the thing that you have to do, then I'm with you. And our service actually is part of our role, to be in court, to be in police interviews, to be in forensic investigation. Whatever goes on, if the client wants or needs support, we will physically turn up so that they're not there on their own. Again, that's about safety, and it's also about saying we're here with you for the long haul, because working with survivors of sexual assault, particularly childhood sexual assault, it's a long-term process. It doesn't happen in 12 or 18 months.
I'd also want to talk about the impact of that on others that may be interviewed in that process, such as family members, and broadening that to how family members are informed at the present time, what they know, what they don't know, and what he would like them to know about it. I guess the importance for fellows to realise that once they do report to police, it then becomes the police's case and not theirs. And that's a shift that a lot of people don't realise occurs, and that can have some really profound, I think, impacts on men in terms of feeling as though you know, the whole thing has gotten out of their control, and that feeling of it being a runaway train is quite common for fellows. They want to pull that back. So really exploring their expectations, both positive and negative, I think is an important one, so that they can make an informed decision about that. I'd be very careful about not encouraging or discouraging, but offering support, whatever decision they decide, whatever way they decide to go.
The fact that the adversarial system works in a way that really supports offenders, it's, in my opinion, not a great system we have for sexual assault, but it's the one we have. So the burden of proof is really heavily lies with the prosecution, and therefore, you know, we know the offenders have a right to remain silent, whereas a victim survivor will be harangued, usually by the defence attorney, because they are the prosecution's primary witness. A crime against the state, and they will be harangued. Their credibility will definitely be tested. So if they're prepared again for these sorts of things, they can prepare themselves emotionally and psychologically and make sure they've got those supports in place. But I think it's really important too that people understand that a legal matter not progressing to court does not indicate a lack of belief in what they're saying, that it happens very often. So we normalise that. I usually talk to men about that kind of, I don't know if you've seen that inverted triangle, where the attrition rate of sexual assaults. So we know the numbers of assaults that are occurring is much greater than those that are reported, is much greater than those that proceed to trial, is much greater than this tiny little tip of those that lead to conviction. So I would want them to understand that from the very beginning, not to dissuade them, but so they have a realistic expectation that this may not proceed to a conviction. That's best case scenario, may not get there, and it's not a reflection on the system's belief or the police's belief or anyone's belief in their story. It's the nature of the judicial system under which we work, the adversarial system. And I'd also want to explore with them, because for a lot of people who have hit that kind of brick wall when they've gone through the legal process, it can feel, for some of them it can feel okay to have just told their story and to know that it's now a matter of public record. For others, it feels very incomplete. So the offender has been interviewed usually, and some people are happy with that. Just it's now a matter of public record, and he was held to account. I made him held to account.
If a man is thinking about disclosing experiences of sexual abuse to police or some other authority, I would spend time with them in sessions talking about their motivation for doing so, their expectations for doing so, what they would hope to achieve. Are they looking for some sense of justice? Are they looking for compensation? Are they looking for, what are the outcomes? Are they looking for that person, the person who's perpetrated, to be outed, if you like, in the community? I would also spend some time with my client, talking with him about the fact that what he's going to do is come up against institutional responses. And for many men, they've actually experienced abuse in the hands of in the institution context. And they're going to have an institutional response at some point, particularly if they're going to disclose to authority, police or justice systems. And so we'll be doing some work in the therapeutic context about to ensure that they don't get further triggered by the institutional responses, because often the institutions have been situations that have created great harm for them. So I think that's a really important part of the conversation and therapy and the therapy sessions, and also making sure that they've got really capable and wraparound support services in place.
I think it's really important for people who are thinking of going through a legal or formal process of reporting to have a think about what their purpose is. And I guess also to have some conversations about the way in which that disclosure might feel and be experienced very differently from the disclosure they've made already, which might be to a close trusted family member, a friend, or to a counsellor. Because there's a very different purpose in a legal process. It's not a therapeutic process, it's not necessarily even a supportive process, and I think people need to go into that with their eyes wide open. I'd also be talking to them about what their hopes and expectations are about the outcome of that, and encourage them to think realistically about what it might be like for them if those expectations aren't realised, because there's absolutely no guarantee that no matter how convinced a person is that, you know, that their testimony, their word, witness statements, their evidence, that it's actually going to be upheld in a legal process, and what that might be like if the perpetrator is found not to be guilty, or if there is an outcome that they're looking for and it still doesn't feel different. And I think that's the other part. There's sometimes unrealistic hopes that, and I think this is fed a lot by, I guess, popular representations of, you know, that dreadful word closure. You know, that if this person can see this other person either put behind jails or convicted, they'll have closure. And the lived experience of many people is that closure doesn't occur. In fact, for many people, there's a hollow feeling. It's like, well, after all this, why do I still feel a lot of the stuff that I've been feeling?
One of the things I'm aware of is that's probably quite a small group of men who maybe have that opportunity. Often they don't know where the person is anymore. Maybe the person's now dead. Or that there's other kind of factors which make that not a possibility for them. I know a number of men where it's 3-4 years before they actually have the opportunity of giving evidence. And one of the difficulties is it's about not seeing the man's well-being as related to whether it's prosecution or not is secured. It's great if that's something that's possible, but you don't want to put your life on hold for 2-3 years in the hope that this person will get a prosecution. The difficulty is, many of the men I've worked with, that even though we have the conversations about not wanting to overweight this chance of a police prosecution being successful or criminal prosecution being successful, often people do have, just in a small part of their mind, quite an investment in that person being found guilty, and often they want a custodial sentence, and anything less than that can throw up a whole range of emotions and sense of injustice and sense of a system not supporting them. And so understanding that's quite understandable, because they're very clear about this person being responsible. But then also there's the fact of for some people it's a conflicted process. If it's a family member, if other people aren't supporting them in that process, I think it's so hard to get a prosecution, and so you want to make sure that you're prioritising the person's well-being and got all the other bits in place as well to support them in that process, and to not think of it merely as, you know, a statement giving and going to court, because it's really quite a challenge.
I'd want to explore with them other ways that they felt they could get some sort of sense of resolution around it. And I've found a lot of the men I've worked with to be really creative around these sorts of things, and quite primitive and tribal in some ways, some of the rituals that people have come up with that have helped them to feel like they have they've done as much as they can in relation to getting justice. So one guy, for instance, got every photo. It was his uncle who was a sexual offender. He got every photo he could find of his uncle, and he had basically a burning, you know, ceremony where he put letters from his uncle. He wrote stories about what his uncle had done to him. He put them all in there, and he burned them ceremonially. And that for him was very therapeutic. It wasn't a legal resolution, but for him it was a resolution, because it gave a completion to the process for him, and he decided that was all he was going to have to do with him. And still others will go through the VOCAT process, Victims of Crime Assistance Tribunal process in Victoria. I'm not sure what it's called in Queensland, but again, like the civil proceedings, it's about balance of probabilities. There's no burden of proof on the prosecution. If they decide 51% more likely that you have been assaulted, then there is a compensation arm to the sexual assault crime. And then still other men who we've worked with have found compensation through church or other organisations, the Defence Forces, depending on where their sexual assaults occurred. And so that's a process that can sometimes, I think, more important than the financial compensation for most of them. Well, obviously that's welcome for some people too, but more important is the validation, particularly from VOCAT. I have found that a lot of men have had a magistrate who has apologised on behalf of all of the decent people in Victoria, who acknowledge that what has happened to this person has been horrendous. It's been a crime. It should never have happened. This is a drop in the ocean that we can offer as compensation. It's tokenistic. We don't have a lot to offer you, but we would like to offer this as the state of Victoria. And I think often that's really what they need. They need a sense that people get it, how bad it was, and an apology.
To me, one way to get justice is through your own, healing journey, and using your trauma can lead to post-traumatic growth and enormous positive change, and that can be, for some survivors, that is their justice, is that they see how much they've grown and changed. I like the term post-traumatic growth, because I think the journey of recovery through sexual abuse and trauma can be very challenging, but can also lead to enormous positive growth and changes. And for some survivors, when they can turn their adversity into a spiritual journey, in a sense, and a journey of recovery, that can give them enormous meaning and purpose, and lead them down pathways that they never expected could have happened in growthful ways. So I think kind of helping survivors understand that can, in a sense, that can be part of their sense of justice, is their own recovery and their own growth. It depends on it's unique for everyone, and I'm more interested in what will give you a sense of justice for you. But it's not always about going down the legal track. Sometimes it is.